Hello and welcome to IAMC Radio and Podcast. Let's explore the top news headlines today, February 6th. We've got some really fascinating stories coming out of Israel, the U.S., and Nigeria. So, okay, buckle up because things are about to get interesting.
I'm ready when you are.
All right, first up, let's head over to the Middle East, where Israel's defense minister is causing quite a stir. He's ordered the army to come up with a plan for the voluntary departure of Gaza residents. Now, this comes right after President Trump suggested that the U.S. should take over Gaza, a proposal that's been met with a lot of pushback from the international community.
What's interesting here is the timing of this evacuation plan. It comes after over a year of intense conflict in Gaza, with a fragile ceasefire currently in place between Israel and Hamas. You have to wonder if this is a genuine attempt to help Gaza residents or a strategic move by Israel to further its own interests.
That's a great point, and it's made even more complex by the reactions from key players in the region. Saudi Arabia and Jordan have straight up rejected Trump's plan, and Iran is accusing the U.S. of trying to wipe out the Palestinians.
Meanwhile, you've got Prime Minister Netanyahu praising the plan as remarkable, while Hamas is calling it ridiculous and absurd. It really highlights the deep divisions and competing interests at play in this region.
It definitely does, and it's all happening against the backdrop of a devastating humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Over 47,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict, and almost the entire population of Gaza is displaced. So you can see why human rights groups are raising concerns about the potential for mass displacement and the ethics of this evacuation plan. Okay, let's shift gears now and head over to the U.S., where President Trump is reportedly planning to shake up the education system. Word on the street is that he's about to sign executive orders that could essentially dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. This was a major campaign promise of his, and it looks like he's ready to make good on it.
This move really speaks to Trump's broader agenda of shrinking the federal government. He's been a vocal critic of the Department of Education, arguing that it has too much power and a liberal bias. And his nomination of Linda McMahon, the former CEO of World Wrestling Entertainment, to lead the department definitely raised some eyebrows.
Yeah, that was an interesting choice to say the least, especially considering Trump's history with her husband, Vince McMahon. Remember that whole staged wrestling match where Trump body slammed him?
It's hard to forget. But beyond the theatrics, this move could have major implications for education in America. It could affect everything from school funding to curriculum standards to the role of the federal government in education as a whole.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. Speaking of controversial moves, Trump has also signed an executive order withdrawing the U.S. from several UN bodies. This includes the UN Human Rights Council, or UNHRC, and the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, known as UNRWA. The White House is citing anti-American bias as the reason for this withdrawal.
This isn't the first time Trump has pulled the U.S. out of international organizations. During his first term, he withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement and started the process of leaving the World Health Organization. It seems like he's pretty skeptical of multilateral organizations and prefers to go it alone.
It's a pattern that's drawn criticism from a lot of folks who believe that U.S. involvement in these organizations is crucial for global stability and cooperation. But not all of Trump's executive orders are sailing through smoothly. His attempt to end birthright citizenship hit a roadblock when two federal judges, Deborah Boardman and John Koffner, blocked it. They both ruled that the order, which aimed to prevent children of undocumented immigrants and those on temporary visas from automatically becoming U.S. citizens, is unconstitutional.
This order was based on Trump's interpretation of the 14th Amendment. He believes it shouldn't apply to children born in the U.S. if their parents are not citizens or legal residents. But the judges disagreed, and now it looks like this issue is headed for a long legal battle.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the courts. All right, let's switch continents now and head over to Nigeria, where some major changes are brewing. The House of Representatives is considering a proposal to add 31 new states to the existing 36.
This is a really bold move, and it's sure to spark a lot of debate across Nigeria.
These proposed states would cover every region of the country. You've got names like Okunokura and Confluence in Kogi State, Benue, and Apa in Benue State, and even a proposal for a new state carved out of the Federal Capital Territory.
There are specific requirements that need to be met for these new states to be created, including a referendum and approval from the state legislatures. So it's not a done deal by any means, but it's definitely a development worth watching.
Absolutely. And while we're on the topic of Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria, or CBN, has announced some new regulations for foreign exchange transactions.
That's right. They have imposed a weekly limit on how much foreign currency bureau de change can buy from authorized dealer banks. It's capped at $25,000 per week, and it's designed to prevent the misuse of foreign exchange and promote transparency in the market.
The CVN is also tightening reporting requirements for both bureau de change and banks. They're now required to collect BVN and passport information from end users to help combat money laundering.
And there are limits on how much foreign currency individuals can buy each quarter. It's capped at $5,000 for things like travel school fees and medical expenses. These are pretty significant changes, and they're likely to have a real impact on how people access and use foreign currency in Nigeria.
Definitely something to keep in mind if you're planning any trips or transactions involving foreign currency. Now, unfortunately, we have some sad news to share from Nigeria as well. The body of Han Justice Azuka, a member of the Anambra State House of Assembly, has been found on the second Niger Bridge.
This is a tragic end to what's been a very difficult situation. Azuka was kidnapped back in December, and his disappearance has been weighing heavily on the community.
He was a member of the Labour Party and had just recently won back his seat after a court ruling.
A joint security operation is now in control of the bridge, and they're working to track down those responsible for this crime.
It's a stark reminder of the ongoing security challenges that parts of Nigeria are facing. And finally, in the world of business, there's news of a major tech company pulling out of Africa. IBM has announced that it's transferring its operations in 36 African countries, including Nigeria and Ghana, to a subsidiary of the Metis Group.
This move comes as IBM faces declining market share in Nigeria and some financial difficulties globally.
While the company is saying this is just a change in their operating model, it raises some questions about their future commitment to the region.
It'll be interesting to see how this affects local businesses and government agencies that rely on IBM's services. This is a big development in the African tech landscape, and we'll have to wait and see how it all unfolds.
That's a great point to end on for this part of our exploration. We've covered a lot of ground today, from international politics to domestic policy to economic developments, and some truly tragic news. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll delve a little deeper into some of these stories and see what connections we can draw between them. Stay tuned.
You know, one thing that really stands out to me is how interconnected these stories are. We've got Trump's potential dismantling of the Department of Education and his withdrawal from UN bodies. And then on the other side of the world, you have Nigeria grappling with restructuring and economic regulations. It really highlights how decisions made in one part of the world can have ripple effects everywhere.
That's such an important point. And it makes you realize that staying informed about global events isn't just about being knowledgeable. It's about understanding the forces that shape our lives.
Exactly. And speaking of forces shaping lives, let's go back to that proposed evacuation plan for Gaza for a moment. It's a really complex situation with no easy answers. On one hand, you have this devastating humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and people are desperate for relief. But on the other hand, there are serious concerns about whether this plan is truly voluntary and what the long-term consequences might be.
It's like a giant chess game with so many different players and motives. You've got Israel and Hamas, the U.S., Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Iran, and of course the Palestinian people themselves. And they're all trying to navigate this incredibly volatile situation.
And let's not forget the historical context here. This isn't just about a current conflict. It's about decades of displacement, occupation, and broken promises. It's about a deep-seated mistrust between Israelis and Palestinians that makes finding a peaceful solution incredibly difficult.
And that brings us back to Trump's involvement. His proposal to take over Gaza was seen by many as a way to further solidify U.S. support for Israel. But it also alienated a lot of other countries and raised questions about America's role as a neutral mediator in the conflict.
It's a classic example of how U.S. foreign policy decisions can have unintended consequences. And it's a reminder that even the most powerful nation in the world can't always dictate the outcomes of complex geopolitical situations.
It's definitely a lot to think about. And it makes you realize how important it is to stay informed and engage in thoughtful discussions about these issues.
Absolutely. We can't just sit back and watch these events unfold passively. We have a responsibility to understand the complexities, to empathize with those affected, and to advocate for solutions that promote peace and justice.
Well said. Now, before we move on, I wanted to circle back to that proposal for creating 31 new states in Nigeria. It's a really interesting idea, and it got me thinking about the potential benefits and drawbacks.
I'm glad you brought that up. There are definitely some compelling arguments in favor of creating more states. Proponents argue that it would bring government closer to the people, promote more equitable distribution of resources, and give marginalized communities a stronger voice.
I can see how that would be appealing, especially in a country as large and diverse as Nigeria. But what about the potential downsides?
Well, some critics worry that creating more states would actually increase bureaucracy and government spending. They argue that it could also exacerbate ethnic tensions and lead to more competition for resources.
It sounds like there's a real need for careful consideration and thorough analysis before any decisions are made.
Absolutely. It's not a decision to be taken lightly. It requires a deep understanding of the historical, political, and socioeconomic factors at play, and it's crucial to ensure that the voices of all Nigerians are heard and considered.
I think that's a great point to transition into a discussion about the Central Bank of Nigeria's new Forex regulations. These regulations are clearly designed to address specific economic challenges in Nigeria, but they also raise some interesting questions about government intervention in the market and the potential impact on individuals and businesses.
You're right. The CBN is trying to walk a tightrope here. They want to stabilize the currency and prevent financial instability. But they also need to be mindful of how these regulations might affect everyday Nigerians who rely on foreign currency for things like travel, education, and medical expenses.
It's a delicate balance, for sure, and it's a reminder that economic decisions often have social and political implications.
Exactly. And it's why it's so important to have open and honest conversations about these issues. We need to understand the trade-offs, the potential benefits, and the risks involved, and we need to make sure that policies are designed to benefit all members of society, not just a select few.
Those are really powerful insights. As we wrap up this part of our exploration, I'm struck by how much ground we've covered. We've talked about international conflict, domestic politics, economic policy, and even some really heartbreaking news. And through it all, I think we've gained a deeper understanding of the complexities of our world and the importance of staying informed and engaged.
I completely agree. It's been a fascinating journey so far. And I'm eager to see what other insights we uncover as we continue our exploration.
Me too. We'll be back in a moment for our final thoughts on these stories and some key takeaways for our listeners. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our exploration of today's top news headlines. It's been a whirlwind of information and insights. And as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with a few key takeaways to ponder.
I think that's a great idea. It's easy to get lost in the details of these stories, but it's important to step back and see the bigger picture.
Exactly. So first and foremost, I think today's headlines highlight the interconnectedness of our world. Whether it's a conflict in Gaza, a political shakeup in the U.S., or economic regulations in Nigeria, what happens in one part of the world inevitably has ripple effects elsewhere.
It's a reminder that we're all part of a global community, and our actions have consequences that extend far beyond our own borders.
And on that note, I think it's also important to recognize the complexity of these issues. There are rarely simple solutions or easy answers. It's crucial to engage with these stories from multiple perspectives, to consider the historical context, and to be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers.
That's a really crucial point. We need to be critical thinkers, to question assumptions, and to be open to learning from different viewpoints.
Absolutely. And finally, I want to emphasize the importance of staying informed and engaged. It can be overwhelming to keep up with a constant stream of news, but it's essential to make an effort to understand the forces that shape our lives.
Knowledge is power, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're informed, we're better equipped to make informed decisions, to advocate for change, and to hold those in power accountable.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So I encourage you to keep exploring, to keep questioning, and to keep engaging with the world around you. Because ultimately, that's what exploring the top news headlines is all about. It's about fostering curiosity, critical thinking, and a deeper understanding of the complex issues that we face.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up.
Indeed it is. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of today's top news headlines. We hope you found it informative, engaging, and thought-provoking. Until next time, stay informed and stay curious. Thank you for listening to today's top news headlines on IAMC Radio and Podcast.